The story of the Draugr. What if death wasn't the end? What if the dead could return, not as spirits, but as powerful, vengeful monsters with unfinished business? Meet the Draugr, terrifying beings from Norse mythology who rise from their graves to seek revenge, protect their treasures, or curse the living. These aren't your typical zombies. The Draugr are intelligent, malevolent, and armed with supernatural powers that make them unstoppable forces of terror. From their horrifying appearance to their dark magic, these undead creatures are more than just tales. They are warnings of the consequences of dishonor, greed, and disrespect for the dead. Join us as we unravel the terrifying origins, powers, and stories of the Draugr. Will you be ready to face them, or will you fall victim to their wrath like so many before you? Part 1. Origins of the Draugr. The story of the Draugr, the restless undead of Norse mythology, begins deep in the rugged terrain of Viking-age Scandinavia. Unlike the ghosts or spirits found in other mythologies, the Draugr was a corporeal being, a horrifying hybrid of life and death that remained bound to the physical world. But why did these entities rise from their graves, and what do they tell us about the Viking worldview? The term Draugr derives from Old Norse and roughly translates to again walker, or one who walks after death. Unlike many modern depictions of the undead, Draugr, the plural form, were not mindless monsters. They were intelligent, malevolent beings with a specific purpose. Their existence was tied to unresolved issues in life, improper burial practices, or the violation of sacred burial mounds. In Norse culture, death was a complex and deeply spiritual event. Proper burial rites ensured the deceased's journey to their designated afterlife, such as Valhalla for warriors or hell for ordinary folk. Failing to honor these rites left the soul restless, turning the dead into a Draugr. These rites included offerings, prayers, and securing the grave with protective objects such as iron tools or runic carvings. Disturbing the burial mound, whether through theft or other dishonorable acts, was a surefire way to provoke a Draugr's wrath. Interestingly, the Norse concept of the afterlife was not fixed or universal. The dead could remain tied to their graves or their homes, watching over their descendants. Ancestors were often venerated, and their spiritual presence was seen as protective. The Draugr, however, represented a darker possibility, when the dead turned from protectors to predators, bringing chaos instead of guidance. The Draugr's origins also reflect societal fears. In Viking culture, greed, dishonor, or unresolved vengeance were viewed as dangerous traits. These negative qualities could persist beyond death, causing a soul to become a Draugr. This concept served as both a cautionary tale and a way to enforce communal values. After all, no one wanted to risk becoming a restless, vengeful creature in death. Part 2. Traits and powers of the Draugr. The Draugr was far from a one-dimensional monster. These creatures were not only physical threats, but also symbolic representations of chaos and corruption. Their grotesque appearance and supernatural abilities made them both fascinating and terrifying. Draugr were typically described as bloated, with their skin discolored to a dark blue or black, resembling a rotting corpse. The bloating symbolized their connection to the earth and decay. Their eyes burned with an unnatural glow, and their breath reeked of death. Despite their decayed state, they retained superhuman strength, easily overpowering the living. Some accounts even describe Draugr growing to enormous sizes as they walked, towering over their victims. The Draugr's powers were as varied as they were terrifying. Among their most notable traits: shape-shifting. Draugr could transform into animals such as wolves, bulls, seals, or even mist. This ability allowed them to stalk their prey undetected or strike fear into the hearts of their victims. Immense strength. A single Draugr could crush bones or uproot trees. Weapons often broke against their hardened undead bodies. Invisibility. Some Draugr could render themselves unseen, making them nearly impossible to track. Psychological manipulation. They were skilled at instilling fear and despair, often driving their victims to madness. Their curses could linger for generations, spreading misfortune. Poisonous influence. The presence of a Draugr poisoned the land. Crops withered, livestock died, and disease spread, making them an existential threat to entire communities. The Draugr's actions were often tied to their motivations in life. Some guarded treasures buried with them, protecting their hoards with fanatical ferocity. Others sought revenge against individuals who wronged them. There were even tales of Draugr rising out of sheer malice, attacking the living simply because they could. The Draugr's powers and motivations reflect the harsh realities of Viking life. In a world where survival was uncertain and death was omnipresent, these undead beings embodied the ultimate fear, a disruption of the natural order. Part 3. Tales of the Draugr. Ancient Norse sagas offer vivid accounts of encounters with Draugr. These stories served as both entertainment and moral lessons, blending folklore with practical warnings. One of the most notorious Draugr appears in the Erbygja saga. Rlfr Twistfoot, a wealthy and deeply dishonorable man, dies a bitter death and is buried on his farm. Soon after, his Draugr rises, terrorizing the locals. Livestock die mysteriously, and people avoid the area. His grave is eventually relocated to a desolate hilltop, a grim reminder of the consequences of greed and malice. Perhaps the most famous tale of a Draugr is found in Grettir's saga. Glamr, a shepherd who neglects his spiritual duties in life, becomes a Draugr after a violent death. His undead form haunts the countryside, spreading terror and death. When the hero Grettir confronts Glamr, the battle is both physical and psychological. Although Grettir defeats the Draugr, Glamr curses him with lifelong misfortune, highlighting the enduring power of these creatures. Draugr also appear in tales outside Iceland. In some regions, they were said to ride horses made of bones or sail ghostly ships. Their presence was often linked to disturbed burial mounds, underscoring the importance of respecting the dead. Interestingly, similar creatures exist in other cultures, such as the Celtic Revenant and the Slavic Upir. This suggests a universal fear of the undead, tied to the idea of improper death and unresolved spirits. Part 4. Defeating the Draugr. Facing a Draugr was no simple task. These creatures were not only physically imposing, but also imbued with dark magic, requiring both bravery and cunning to defeat. The first step was identifying the source of the disturbance. Draugr were often tied to their graves or burial mounds, making these locations key battlegrounds. Consulting a Volva seer or interpreting omens could help pinpoint the source. Before confronting the Draugr, warriors prepared themselves with protective charms and weapons. Iron, considered a powerful ward against evil, was often used in weapons or placed in graves to prevent the dead from rising. Defeating a Draugr required both physical strength and knowledge of his weaknesses. Common methods included decapitation. Cutting off the Draugr's head and placing it at its feet disrupted its connection to the living world. Burning the body. Destroying the remains by fire was a definitive way to ensure the Draugr could not rise again. Dismemberment. Some accounts describe cutting the Draugr's body into pieces and scattering them far apart. Binding rites. Using spells or sacred rituals to bind the Draugr's spirit permanently to the afterlife. Victory was not guaranteed, however. Many sagas end with the hero barely escaping or suffering long-term curses, emphasizing the danger and unpredictability of these encounters. The Draugr's legacy endures as one of Norse mythology's most iconic monsters. They symbolize humanity's deepest fears of death, unresolved guilt, and the chaos of an unpredictable world. In a time when survival was uncertain, the Draugr served as both a cautionary tale and a reflection of cultural values. They reminded people of the importance of honor, community, and respect for the dead. Today, the Draugr continues to haunt our imaginations, appearing in stories, games, and movies as a testament to their enduring power. So, as we delve into these ancient myths, one question lingers. What would you do if the restless dead rose to haunt the living? Would you confront them, or would you flee into the night, hoping the grave would not call your name next?